Today we have a story of a crazy entitled parent who claims that it's actually okay for their son to hit somebody. We'll get into that in a bit, but first, my parents are intolerant of my political views. My mom and I just had a massive argument. She was pressuring me to vote for Lord Trump and I said no because of he's a fascist and Project 2025 will flip the tables and Republicans will rule the states with an iron fist and enforce Christianity into the law and threaten people like me. My mom got so offended, denied any of this stuff from ever happening, and called me embarrassing and that I'm just listening to my phone or liberal propaganda. My mom was like, Trump's gonna fix the economy. And while Trump may have been good with the economy, he was terrible in all other places. She was really giving me a hard time for my different political views, and my dad's the same way. Like when he threw a tantrum for being pro-choice and called me mentally deranged. He yelled at me and threw all kinds of insults. My entire family is like this. They're these funky right-wing evangelicals who deny their extremism and the corruption of the Republican Party. They have this, I'm right, you're wrong mentality, and they kind of deny this too. Now, I'm not even going to touch the topic of political views and political topics and whatnot. I think the problem here is people who are intolerant to anybody that may not agree that their direction is the direction. And I don't necessarily think it's a one-side issue. I think there's definitely people on both sides of the spectrum who hear, I'm voting Democrat or I'm voting Republican and immediately denounce your entire existence and think you're some controlled puppet and loony. Definitely kind of the extremism, I suppose, is the issue. Cultural Pack 3618 wrote, low contact and info diet? Who are you going to vote for? I'm not sure yet. Candidate A is the only option? Interesting. Thank you for sharing. Well, who are you going to vote for? Don't know. Sofa Couch 813 added, I guess I'm confrontational by nature because I would just say, I'm not discussing this with you, please do not bring it up. Either respect my boundaries or I'll ignore your calls and not answer your texts. But I do appreciate your perspective though. Also, hi, I'm Steven, and if you guys enjoy stories of crazy entitled parents, why not hit those like and subscribe buttons down below? That said, our next story is, Entitled Mother Causes Scene at Bakery. So this was my first time seeing a real-life Karen and I had to share this. So I was at a bakery to buy bread. I was waiting in line with my mom when I saw a young woman screaming at the bakery's manager. I assume she asked for him, of course. I couldn't make out what was going on at first. I just heard her yelling about how that bakery mistreated her daughter and how she would fight for her rights. When it was mine and my mom's turn in line, my mother asked the baker what was going on and he explained. Apparently that woman's daughter, who's a grown adult, was waiting in line while her mother waited. When it was the daughter's turn in line, the baker called her but she was on her phone and didn't pay attention. The baker tried to call her several times but she paid no attention, so he asked for the next person in line. The daughter then noticed she was skipped and her mother went furious and started yelling and asking for the manager because her daughter was mistreated. And after talking to the manager, she went to the poor baker and yelled for the whole bakery to hear, Everyone look, this is the man who mistreated my daughter, and left the bakery fuming. That was a really weird experience for me and my mother. After we paid, my mom just said to the baker, some people just like to cause a scene. And they both awkwardly smiled. And then we left. 1,000,000% some people just like to cause a scene. They clearly had a bad case of main characteritis where they thought everybody should just wait for them. What she did was even worse, but I feel like it's kind of akin to that experience where you're watching one of your favorite movies with somebody that you want to show it to, and like 5, 10, 15 minutes in, you look over and you realize they're just scrolling on their phone. I don't know if it's petty and childish to me, but at that point, the whole thing's almost ruined, because like clearly they don't have enough investment, right? Or should I just pause and wait for you to finish reading your tweet? Ever Disheveled wrote, I had a woman freak out at me for a similar reason once. We were at a doctor's office and had a sign-in sheet so people could be called in the order in which they came. Not for appointments, this was other assistants. The sheet clearly said to print your name. The woman had signed her name in illegible cursive, so I decided to skip over it instead of shouting out onto the sales floor, asking for the person who signed their name instead of printing. When she realized she'd been waiting for a rather long while, she came up and threw a fit. Even after I pointed out that I couldn't read what she had written, and I could decipher my own grandmother's aged swirly loops and had no way to call her name. Our next story is, Father-in-law forgot that I have zero chill. I had hoped that my last post here would have been the last time I felt the need to share here. Guess not, so let me set the stage. My husband, 30-year-old male, and I, 34-year-old male, are at my in-laws to celebrate them semi-retiring to El Salvador. Neither of us were stoked to go, but my mother-in-law is a sweetheart and she asked nicely, so we went. Surprisingly, father-in-law was actually behaved. A whole hour into the celebration, and he hadn't so much as talked about himself or judged anyone. It was divine. Unfortunately, good things don't always last. Doubly so when he's involved. To give y'all some background, my husband has 2 last names which are hyphenated. One is his dad's last name and one is his mom's. When we got married, I told him I'd be willing to have 2 last names, but I was keeping mine and he needed to decide which one we were going with. He decided on his mom's last name. Unsurprising, his dad is a narcissistic jerk. Now, we dragged butt on getting our names officially changed because we got married in the middle of COVID. We finally decided to actually go through with it last week. Unfortunately, my husband brought this up to his mom and his dad overheard. Y'all, I swear to God, that man almost had a full-fledged temper tantrum. It was there that we had learned that mother-in-law didn't even want to take his last name and refused to do so unless he agreed having it hyphenated with hers. Now he was butthurt because my husband didn't want to take his name at all. My husband then had the arduous task of explaining to his narcissistic father that he didn't feel that close to that side of the family. The meltdown continues until other family members tell him to shut it. Then father-in-law makes the fatal mistake of trying to drag me in it. He says, "What do you think about this?" I tell him, "It wasn't my choice to make. This is what he chose and I'm backing him up." He replied, "Oh, you're just being submissive to your husband." Now, I don't ascribe to the whole toxic masculinity thing. I have minimal patience and bad knees. I ain't got time to subject myself to arbitrary rules and traits. And I dang sure don't have time to unpack the misogynistic need to assign gender roles based off of bedroom antics. But what I am is a petty man when pushed. So without missing a beat, I replied, "Oh, I wouldn't know anything about that. You'd have to ask your son about that one." Now, am I wrong for employing the same misogynistic tactics that my father-in-law was using? Yes, fully. Did both me and my husband laugh our butts off at the sheer despair on that man's face? You bet your sweet bippy we did. We laughed so hard that he wound up leaving the house entirely. One of these days, that man is going to figure out that I won't put up with his bullcrap. Honestly, maybe if OP pokes and prods and fires it right back at them long enough, they'll come to actually have some respect for OP. Because OP isn't a pincushion or a pushover. Or he's just firmly rooted in his ways and he'll never change, who knows. Just an old baby boomer wrote, "Instant karma, LOL." Our next story is over-controlling parents. I don't know if this is considered controlling or not, but I'm going to rant about it anyways. If this is not considered controlling, feel free to yell at me in the comments. I will completely ignore you. This story doesn't revolve around a single event and more so my life altogether. I'm 15, male, and I have super controlling parents. Anything in my life that they can control, they will find a way to control it. My dad controls my router and turns off my internet at 6:30 saying, "I need to do stuff with the family." Thing is, my sister, 12-year-old female, leaves for swim at that time, and he never comes out of his office I'm not allowed into until around 7 to 7:30. So I end up sitting around doing nothing when I could be working on setting up my streaming career. Also, they make me give them all the money I ever get and put it into a bank account under my name, but which I have no access or control over. The bank even sent me a letter to help me finish the account, and they made me give it to them, with which they presumably pretended to be me to finish setting up the account. If I even ask for something as low as $10, they say no under the pretense of saving for a car. I have over 3,000 in the account and just won another 1,000 in a contest and want to use it to jumpstart my streaming career, but my parents are very against the idea, to the point where they will lie to me and say the contest winnings aren't in the bank account yet. It's been over 6 months since the contest ended and they said I would get my money. Another incident of control is that I have an Android phone, and they installed the Android Family Control app. When I turned 13, I got the email saying I could now uninstall the app, and being a dumb 13-year-old, I showed my dad. He then went on to threaten me and force me to delete the email. 2 years later, I was mad at the absurd time limits he was setting on my phone. An hour and a half a day and no social media apps like YouTube, TikTok, Twitter, Facebook, etc. And I stumbled across a Reddit post talking about the email I'd been made to delete. I did some more digging and eventually got the app uninstalled on my phone. When my dad found out, he went absolutely berserk and punished me by taking away my phone for almost a month. I don't know if this is controlling or not, but any way I can change my circumstances, please let me know in the comments. I believe I may have been mentally traumatized from all the control, as whenever I encounter somebody in power, I instantly hate them and we never get along. I feel like the problem more so is OP doesn't feel listened to or respected. I don't think what the parents are doing is too crazy. I mean, maybe you could argue an hour and a half is pretty darn restrictive for a 15-year-old, I don't know. At 15 in general, you're not really ever truly in control of your own finances. I think the important thing is, as far as the bank account goes, that you deserve to get statements every month. If they say it's your money, they need to be able to be truthful and show you what's in that account, even if they're not letting you pull from it. Princess Tatsumi wrote, "This may be a bit much for Reddit to help you with, sweetheart, but as a no-contact adult, I understand what you're going through and have my deepest apologies for what you're going through, as nobody deserves that." Our next story is, "You will decorate your apartment how I want it to be." My mom is a bit of a narcissist. At first, she appears to be perfectly normal until you get to know or live with her, which is why she can't seem to keep any friends or even her own children in contact with her. I've gone no contact as of 2023. After having enough of living with her entitlement and narcissism, I moved out between 19 and 20 years old, which is a bit uncommon since rent has skyrocketed in the area. I managed how I could with a roommate who had a well-paying job and my own job. She paid for none of my living expenses. We did everything on our own. Despite that, she's always tried to control every aspect of my life, and her continuing to do that is why I chose to go no contact. I only realized that was an option through therapy and a bunch of supportive friends a few years later. Before that time, I was still listening to her and she was able to guilt me into a lot of things I didn't want. When I moved out, I was striving to decorate my new apartment in any way I saw fit. I had so many ideas. I immediately hung up all the posters I had in my room and the hallway. The walls had a few cracks and I wanted to cover them. We used red and blue thumbtacks. We didn't have a kitchen table yet, but we never ate at the table anyways. I wanted something either really small so that it wouldn't take up space or something multifunctional. We ended up looking for a pool table with a solid cover over the top so that we could put a vinyl tablecloth over it to protect it from stains. My dad loved the idea. My mom, not so much. She hated how I decorated my new apartment. She claimed it looked childish with my fairy lights across the ceiling. Dad thought it looked like a bachelor pad and had no issue with it. Gotta love Dad. She kept making comments about how I needed to take down the posters and get paintings I didn't like or need. She kept telling me I needed to paint something, I paint, and have it framed for the hallway. Every single time I visited or came home for more of my things, it was a similar conversation each time of how she thought my apartment was ugly, how she would have never have done it that way, how she needed to come in and fix it, how no adult would ever choose to have it like that. She was wanting me to entirely redecorate my entire apartment, which would have costed hundreds of dollars to hire a painter or buy stuff I didn't need from Goodwill. I kept trying to gently tell her that I liked how my apartment looked and that I was an adult who could make their own choices. We hadn't moved all of my things inside the apartment yet. It was really horrible how many mean comments she was making on how I had no taste, how I needed to take everything down and start over, how her house looked so much better. For the most part, I'd ignored it. I was very much used to her hating everything about what I did. Then she stopped making those comments and started to take me to yard sales in hopes of finding something I needed. It was a plot of her own, of course. She found a kitchen table and chairs that she fell in love with. I didn't want them. I was looking for a pool table. She bought them all, and when Dad told her she wasn't getting rid of his kitchen table, she gifted them to me. I was raised to always accept gifts she gave me, or she would raise absolute heck. She would make it her mission to make me feel guilty and like the worst person in the world if I didn't appear to like her gifts. There have been times she returned some of my Christmas presents because I didn't have the correct reaction to them. If I didn't have a huge smile on my face and enthusiastically thanking her for what she had gotten me, it would disappear from my present pile and I'd never see it again. There were other times she told my sibling to steal it from me and I would never get a chance to wear the shirt, play with the toy, etc. just because I didn't act eternally grateful or put on a huge show of gratitude to make her have any semblance of self-esteem. She thought she was entitled to control my reaction to her giving me a gift. Other times, she thought she was entitled to other people's gifts and steal my dad's, or my siblings' presents because she thought she looked better in them, or just simply wanted them. I was never allowed to own a console because she believed I would spend less time with her. In reality, I found other ways to not spend time with her that wasn't technology. She just didn't want to give me something I'd use to ignore her with. I ended up saving every piece of birthday money to buy myself a laptop at 16, with no help from her because she would often tell people at my birthday parties to not gift me money, claiming I would spend it all. When each person approached me about what I wanted for my birthday and teased me about not being good with money, I would tell them my plans and show them my stash of money I'd saved thus far. Of course, she took to stealing my money on the occasion because she didn't want me to have independence, or a way to ignore her. I was wanting to save up for a car, or a computer, something I would need when I was an adult. I would keep a record of my money in a little notebook which detailed the number of bills, coins, and amount, which is how I found out she was stealing my money. Dad made her feel so bad, she stopped doing it. Dad often put a stop to things like that, but he couldn't mediate everything due to working all the time. This is just a few reasons why I had to be very careful of the gifts she gave me, and the entire reason I begrudgingly accepted the gift of the kitchen table. Otherwise, she would tell the entire extended family that I was on drugs, and that I needed to come back home in an attempt to get me in a place where she could control me. That kitchen table ended up being very abused when I adopted a stray cat who didn't know where the litter box was. She figured it out. After peeing on the table a few times, I was never more proud. The table and chairs ended up in the dumpster when I moved. Most of the chairs had broken because of the climate and wood not being compatible with each other. As for the posters, I did not replace them with paintings. They stayed where I put them until I moved to another state. The fairy lights did not last because she would come visit and secretly cut them with scissors. I gave up on replacing them. I didn't realize she was doing it until years later when she admitted to it. I have never felt more free after buying my own home and decorating it with posters, multicolored thumbtacks, and Christmas lights bought on sale. They really aid the kids in finding the bathroom in the dark, and the teens love the Star Wars posters. I'm planning on hanging up some different ones soon. Hope you like them, Mom. I feel like what OP said about cutting the lights is the perfect hypothetical, where somebody says, what's the smallest thing your mom could do to you to make you decide it is the right thing to go no contact with them? And I feel like a surprising amount of people would say finding out about them cutting the lights on purpose because they didn't like them would be a good contender for maybe the smallest considerable thing. Realistic Noise 2 wrote, out of curiosity, before you went no contact, did you get anything that would especially make her mad and taunt her to say, I got this, it's staying, what are you gonna do? Oh wait, you can't because it's mine and you don't have control? I know it's a bit much, but when you get somebody like that, sometimes it's nice to kind of rub salt in the wound a few times, knowing that it'll annoy them that they don't have control they want or the reaction they want. OP responded saying, when I did buy some paintings, I made sure to have them depict nude men and women to be displayed in a room with sheer curtains. All the decorations she hated stayed right where I parked them and currently live on in the new house. Sometimes she gets wind of the things I do through the rest of the family that I'm still in contact with. I'm sure she hates everything I'm doing right now, namely that I live 8 states away and married someone she's unable to influence in any way, shape, or form. Our next story is, my son's allowed to hit you. I'm a plumber, and my job brings me to the insides of a lot of homes. I have many funny stories, but this is really my only really negative one, as other stories are just rude people and constant reschedulers. Anyway, one time in particular, me, was to go to entitled mom's house to fix her sink. Her husband had left her recently and she didn't know how to fix the problem, and she's called in a couple of times, as her husband would be gone quite frequently. I don't know why and don't want to assume, and couldn't fix it. So I was called into the home, and as I arrived, I was greeted by entitled kid, and he yells to his mother, and she lets me in and leads me to the sink that isn't working. Most cases, the sink is leaking. This one wasn't pushing water into the spout though, so there was no mess. Entitled kid approaches me as I start to work and is kicking me. He's not hurting me, but it got agitating after a little bit, so I tell entitled kid to stop, to where he proceeds to start hitting me in the face. So I get entitled mother, and this is the conversation that unfolds. I say, could you possibly tell your son to please stop hitting me while I'm working? It makes it hard to focus. She replies, "What do you mean? Is he hurting you?" I said, "No, not really. I'm just trying to focus and it's annoying." She says, "So if he's not hurting you, what does it matter?" I tell her, "Well, I'm trying to focus and it's quite aggravating." She says, "Entitled's kid name, is this true?" The kid says, "Yes." I'm shocked he didn't lie. The entitled mother says, "Well, it's my house and our rules are different, OP." I reply to her, "Are you serious?" She says, "Yes, I am. My son is allowed to hit you because you are in the premises of my house." She then crosses her arms. I start to pack up my tools and such and walk toward the door to leave. She says, "What are you doing? I paid good money for your services." I tell her, "I'll make sure we get you a refund," and drive away. From what I know, this hasn't happened to any other people who came into the house to fix it in the past, as it wasn't brought up to me, nor has anyone left on her before, besides her husband. Also, don't worry, she got her refund. I'm not worried in the least bit whether or not this lady got her refund. Honestly, I feel like if the company tried to keep the money, they would be completely within their rights. I'd love to have heard this story had like an awesome manager who fought for OP and made sure they still got like a commission on the job, because nobody deserves to do something as unappreciated but extremely important as plumbing and having to just smile while you get kicked and hit in the face by a child. Dib1995 wrote, "I'd love to see her in court 20 years from now when her son has an assault charge on him. Well, they were in his house, so he's allowed to do whatever he wants. He'll get thrown in prison and she'll be locked up in an asylum because she is definitely crazy." Rosebush Raven wrote, "Ironically, there's a good chance she will be the one that gets assaulted in their own home by the hellspawn she raised. Oh, but then you bet it's suddenly one heck of a problem because it's now her precious Tushies being hit, not a random plumber that she feels she owns because she paid them money for their services." Our next story is, "You can't charge me for bags, that's illegal." For context and some background, I'm a bagger/cashier at a grocery store in my area. At the store I work at, we charge 10 cents for a paper bags. Me, myself, I think this is stupid and tend not to charge people for them if they're decent enough to have a small conversation with the 18-year-old cashier who does retail for a living. Anyway, here's the story. Cast, me, OP, the Tooth Fairy, me, of course. Entitled mother, for context, the kid in the story didn't interact at all, but the fact that this woman is a mother is a somewhat major part of the story, the training cashier, and the kind customer. As I said before, I work as a cashier/bagger in a local/somewhat statewide grocery store. It was a relatively normal day and I was asked to train one of the new hires on the register, so I was bagging and occasionally helping training cashier with the things he didn't know how to do yet. Enter the Australian entitled mother and her, apparently autistic child. The child appeared to be around mid to late 20s. The interaction goes as follows. Entitled mother says, "I heard you charge for bags here. You can't do that." I say, "I'm sorry, ma'am, but it's company policy. We are required to charge for the bags." She says, "Actually, no, you can't. I don't know who you think you are, but I'm just trying to buy my groceries and I'm here with my," she said in a very loud, "autistic daughter. I can't be paying for bags." The training cashier said, "I'm sorry, but as OP said, we have to charge for them." She says, No, actually, it's illegal for you to charge for bags. You didn't tell me first." I say, "Ma'am, I don't believe it's illegal for us to be following company policy." She says, "Listen, little crap." For added hilarity, I'm taller than this woman. "I'm not paying for these bags and I'm not moving till I get to speak to a manager." A kind customer said, "Go ahead and get the manager, but quit taking up the line." For a bit of quick background, this was during a particularly busy rush of the day. I then proceeded to go to the desk and page my manager. He then came down, had her pay at the service desk, and had her leave the store. Turns out she had done this same exact thing to another of my coworkers 2 weeks prior after she left. I haven't seen her since, and it's been around a month or two since this incident. Honestly, I'm not even that against the idea of the state or the governing body having like a 10-cent charge on paper or plastic bags and having that money funnel to some kind of ecosystem restoration services. I mean, honestly, it's clearly an initiative to try to be more green. I don't know if it's also like them trying to peddle their own bags or something, but there's definitely nothing stopping this lady from having her own reusable bags, and hey, you don't have to worry about anything, and eventually you'll get your money back if you go to the store enough. Kiwi Muzz wrote, "It's easy. If they don't want to pay for a bag, they can just carry everything without a bag." OP responded saying, "That's the funny thing, she had a bag with her." Now, she still needed paper bags, but she came in with her own bag and the knowledge that we charge for bags. Our next story is starting to regret becoming an instructor. So I'm a volunteer Taekwondo instructor. I looked after children 10 to 15 years old in our training camp for the last week. The kids were great, but parents exist. Here are the highlights. Parents complained that we didn't take enough photos for their social media accounts. We only took one group photo. Due to laws here, we can't just take pictures of kids without written permission of everyone involved, so we decided we just don't. The kids actually liked that. The parents, absolutely not. I got so many texts demanding more pics. Too many mosquitoes. Well, I'll inform the mosquitoes about this, I guess. No Wi-Fi and bad reception, so the kids could not be contacted. We actually had a no phones during camp policy. We instructors had landline phones and Wi-Fi, and in case of emergency, every parent had the numbers. Again, the kids had no issue with this. No single rooms. At a youth hostel. In a medieval castle. And my personal favorite, one of the kids got sick. Little guy, first time in the camp, first time away from home without parents. He had a bad tummy ache. He was constipated, probably also due to his nervousness. He said he couldn't get up, was crying, and asked me to call his mom to pick him up. It's a 3-hour drive, so mom was not happy, but they all signed that they will pick up sick children. I let her talk to the kid, then I talked to her. She tells me he often gets constipated. It's not a big deal, just give him an enema. Oh, heck no! So I tell her the other options. Either he gets better in the next 30 minutes, or A, she will come pick him up, or B, we will call an ambulance. So we get him to lay down and give him some herbal tea in a hot water bottle, but he doesn't get better. So we call mom to pick him up. She shows up and wants to show us how to do an enema so we can do it the rest of the week. No. Nope, not gonna happen. I'm really sorry for the kid missing the camp, but no. So she takes him home after so much discussion. Honestly, I feel sorry for that kid, and if that's an actual issue and she goes, "Oh, just give him an enema like it's nothing," honestly, they probably need to get checked out. I mean, I guess if they have an actual issue, the options are regular enemas or some kind of surgical intervention, which I guess they probably want to avoid. I mean, I just feel bad for that kid because not only is it embarrassing to have to go home because of constipation, it's embarrassing to hear your parents say, "Oh, just give him an enema." Electrical Raisin 80 wrote, "This post reminds me of some friends I used to have. During the summers and some school breaks, they would organize little workshops for the neighborhood kids to keep them off the streets and out of trouble. They would teach various crafts, play sports, museum and park trips, tutored kids who were having trouble with math or English. No cost to the parents except for an occasional admission ticket. Parents were asked to contribute for supplies or food, but it wasn't required. The kids were fine with whatever went on. If there wasn't a place for them in one particular group, they would happily take a spot in another. It was the parents that was the problem. Why couldn't my kid do painting today? Why are you only taking X number of kids to so-and-so? Why can't I bring my very expensive guitar for my son to practice with? He plays it at home." My friends stopped doing it after 3 years. They loved working with the kids, but each successive group of parents just kept getting worse. More demanding, more entitled, more dismissive and disrespectful. I feel sorry for that sick little boy. Instead of taking him to a doctor to figure out his digestion problem, probably needs to change his diet. It sounds like his mother's giving him enemas on a regular basis several times a week. To my mind, that is child abuse. But with that being said, that's all the time we have for today. Now, if you want to hear another crazy entitled parent story, check out that video on the left. Or if you missed my latest video, check out that video on the right. That said, I'll see you all next time with some more stories.